Nick travels to the Caribbean with his wife Lisa and their young son Andy for a family vacation. They rent a small speedboat and spend the day riding across the sea. Lisa becomes worried after they travel far from shore and suggests returning, but Nick and Andy want to continue. They find a deserted island and stop there for a while. When they are ready to leave, the boat refuses to start. Nick checks the engine and discovers that it is cheap and unreliable. Night approaches, and their phones have no signal. Lisa assumes the boat owner will report them missing when they fail to return. Nick admits that he rented the boat from an unlicensed operator to save $50. The owner never recorded their information, so nobody knows where they went. Nick considers swimming for help, but the mainland is too far away. The family has no choice but to spend the night on the island. A boat passes in the distance the next day, but nobody hears their calls for help. By the third day, Andy begins suffering from severe dehydration. Nick is a doctor and knows his son cannot survive much longer without water. He pushes the broken boat back into the sea and places Lisa and Andy inside, hoping the current will carry them somewhere they can be found. He also uses large leaves to give them some protection from the sun. They drift for a day and a night without seeing another boat. The current eventually carries them near another deserted island. Nick then hears an engine and spots a fishing boat. He signals for help, and two fishermen notice the family. One fisherman approaches, gives them water, and appears ready to rescue them. The fisherman carries Andy toward his boat, but stops after realizing how desperate the family is. He tells Nick that he will rescue them only if he is paid. Nick offers $10,000, then increases the amount to $40,000, explaining that it is almost all his savings. The fisherman demands $1 million. Nick says he is only a small-town doctor and does not have that kind of money. The fisherman argues that Nick can afford an expensive Caribbean vacation while he earns very little from fishing. He refuses to help unless Nick finds more money. Nick reminds him that Andy is only 6 years old and needs help, but the fisherman refuses to change his demand. With no other option, Nick agrees to contact friends and relatives and try to raise the money. The fisherman then knocks Nick unconscious. Nick wakes restrained inside a boat. Lisa and Andy are still on the island. The fisherman explains that he is taking Nick back to town to arrange the payment first. After reaching land, Nick calls his brother, friends, and relatives. Most cannot help, but he manages to collect about $150,000. Adding his own $40,000 gives him around $190,000. At the bank, Nick tells the fisherman that $190,000 is all he can get. The man accepts because the amount is still far more than he normally earns. Nick transfers the money into his account, expecting to be taken back to Lisa and Andy. At the marina, the fisherman tells Nick to drive a separate boat and follow him. When Nick enters the cabin, the door is locked from the outside. The fisherman claims it is only a safety precaution. Once they reach open water, he signals for Nick to stop and climbs onto Nick's boat with a spear gun. Nick realizes the fisherman never intended to keep his promise. Nick tells him that he will not report anything, while the fisherman's partner also tries to stop the situation from going further. The fisherman believes Nick will eventually contact the police. He damages Nick's boat so that it begins filling with water, then returns to his own vessel. Nick begs him to make sure Lisa and Andy are rescued, but the two fishermen leave as the boat sinks. Trapped inside the cabin, Nick searches for a way out. He finds a heavy object, breaks the window, escapes through the opening, and reaches the surface. He is too exhausted to swim toward land, so he stays afloat until a group of tourists finds and rescues him. Nick tells the police that his wife and son are stranded on an island, but the area contains hundreds of small islands and he cannot identify the correct one. The authorities explain that a complete search could take weeks. Nick knows Lisa and Andy may not survive that long. The sheriff then asks whether Nick and Lisa had relationship problems and whether Lisa or Andy has life insurance. Nick realizes the police suspect that he may have harmed his own family and invented the kidnapping story. He controls his anger and returns to his hotel as ordered. Nick refuses to wait while his family remains in danger. He decides to find the fishermen himself and force them to reveal the island's location. He visits a seafood market, but it is already closed. A cleaner tells him about a driver at the marina who knows many local fishermen. The driver cannot identify the man, but directs Nick to a bar where fishermen often spend their evenings. The bar does not give Nick the information he needs. When he calls the sheriff for an update, The sheriff orders him back to his hotel because the police still consider him suspicious. Nick ends the call and returns to his taxi. Nick notices a stitched scar on the driver's hand, which reminds him of a similar scar on the fisherman. The driver says his injury was treated at the only hospital in the area. Nick has an injured foot, so he goes to that hospital for treatment and asks the doctor about a patient with a similar stitched wound. The doctor refuses to reveal confidential medical information. Nick explains that his wife and son are missing. The doctor understands but cannot legally provide the records, so he leaves the room for a moment. Nick uses the nearby computer and finds a patient who receives stitches on his arm. His name is Miguel. Nick photographs Miguel's address and believes he has finally identified the fisherman. Nick goes to Miguel's home and asks a woman where he is. After entering the house, Nick notices that Miguel's son appears seriously ill and realizes that Miguel's demand for money may be connected to his child's medical treatment. He also finds a photograph containing information about Miguel's fishing boat and takes a picture of it. When Miguel returns, a fight breaks out after Nick accuses him of kidnapping Lisa and Andy. Nick overpowers Miguel, but a woman appears with a spear gun. Miguel's daughter then enters the room, and during the chaotic confrontation, both Nick and Miguel's daughter are injured. Nick wakes in a hospital bed with one hand cuffed. The sheriff tells him that he is accused of causing Miguel's death. Nick insists that he acted in self-defense and that Miguel kidnapped his family. The sheriff no longer believes his story and has stopped the search for Lisa and Andy. Nick knows that staying in custody could cost his family their lives. He catches a police officer off guard, takes the officer's handgun, forces the officers to release him, and escapes from the hospital. Using the boat information from Miguel's house, Nick goes to the port authority. He discovers where Miguel's fishing boat had been kept, but its rental ended the previous day and the vessel is gone. Police are also searching the streets for Nick, so he boards a bus to avoid being caught. Nick notices Miguel's fishing partner sitting on the bus. The man sees him and runs. Nick follows, but his injured foot prevents him from keeping up. Nick stops threatening him and begs him to reveal where Lisa and Andy are. The man eventually stops. He had already objected when Miguel tried to leave Nick to die, showing that he was uncomfortable with Miguel's actions. The fisherman becomes badly injured during the confrontation. Nick asks a nearby driver for help, then shows the fisherman a map and begs him to point out the island where his family was left. The man finally identifies the location. Nick now knows where Lisa and Andy are. The injured fisherman needs medical attention, and the hospital is in the opposite direction from the marina. Nick helps place him in the driver's vehicle and tells the driver to take him to the hospital while he continues toward the docks. At the marina, Nick takes control of a private yacht, enters the island coordinates, makes sure it has enough fuel, and heads out to sea. Maritime police soon begin following him and repeatedly order him to stop. Nick continues because he believes every minute matters. The officers fire toward the yacht in an attempt to stop it. Nick takes cover and pushes the yacht to full speed, allowing him to escape their immediate pursuit. Nick follows the coordinates and finally reaches the correct island. He finds Lisa and Andy alive but in critical condition. Nick gives Lisa water and helps her regain consciousness. Andy is in worse condition, so Nick uses rescue breathing and chest compressions until his son responds. Nick carries Andy to the yacht and returns for Lisa. His body is exhausted from everything he has survived, and he collapses while trying to carry her. A police helicopter appears above the island moments later, showing that the authorities have finally found the family. The story ends with Nick, Lisa, and Andy finally being located after days of danger. Their entire ordeal began because Nick tried to save $50 by renting a cheap boat from an unlicensed operator. That small decision left them stranded without anyone knowing where they had gone and led to everything that followed.